Ready to roll, Katarina?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Scaling value from IIoT, scene number 4. All right, so welcome back to our series on Internet of Things in industry and how you generate value out of that. Today we talk a little bit about, rollout, and cost associated with that, and especially how that impacts your digitalization efforts. Now, in order to start, just let's recap a little bit from our previous series. So we talked about what is the approach, what does it take to generate value from Internet of Things? And we identified 3 phases, right? So the first phase is you need to find a use case. The use case needs to have a well-defined value add. It needs to be clear and defined. And the second phase is building a solution against it, a technical solution that addresses this use case. And you need to manage different variants as you want to roll it out to different setups in your plants or in your processes. Now the last and probably most important step is how can you replicate a solution that you build once against a certain use case across all your sites and all your different installations where this use case applies. Now if this goes seamlessly, then you start to generate value. Now before we go into how we solve this replicate challenge, I just wanted to introduce a concept that helps you to understand what costs are associated with that and what the role they play. Now let's look at this picture and let's assume this is a 2-dimensional graph where one dimension basically represents the cost for building and operating a solution, right? So that's the y-axis, building and operating a solution. That is one element of your total cost for your business case for the IoT solutions you build and you roll out. Now the second dimension is the rollout, right? So it doesn't help you building once a solution, but you need to also roll them out across your sites or your different assets with the same use case in order to generate the full value. Now, where do we stand today? Where do we navigate today in this chart? And I think let's start with the first, I would say, scenario where you build an important, big solution which is highly customized for one of your plants, and it's, of course, a lot of value add associated to that, but it's complex, it's costly, and you cannot really replicate it. Now, scenarios of that are a lot out there, right? So it's customized MES installations, homemade MES installations, all different type of computer systems that run your production. Highly customized for one plant, costly to build and operate, but you cannot really replicate them. Now, a lot of effort has been put into the last 4 years, into technologies that reduce the cost for building a solution. Now these technologies, for example, include low-code or cloud-based solutions. I mean, cloud is an enabler for that. But low-code basically does nothing else than reducing the cost for building a solution. Now this scenario number 2, of course, is favorable. I mean, you can build more solutions at lower cost, but still it does not really address the challenge of how can I replicate a solution from one side with one setup into the next side with a similar setup but the same use case. Now this is where you want to end up, of course. So you want to build IoT solutions that can be replicated across multiple sites with a low cost for rollout. Now if you ask me today what is the technological solution for this gap, for bridging this gap, I mean, there's not a real answer to that, right? I mean, low-code addresses, of course, getting more effective on building solutions, but not necessarily on replicating that. Now, this is where you want to end up. And if you ask me, what are these different scenarios? So that's number 3 here. I think let's start with one. I would call that the Big Bang scenario. So Big Bang digitalization. You make a huge project, you invest. But of course, the negatives are you need to invest, it's costly, it's risky, and most of the times there is at least a challenge to implement if not there failing. Now the second scenario is where you apply some new technologies to build solutions very quickly, but you cannot replicate them. I would call it a POC desert. So you build a lot of solutions individually, all different, but they're not scaling. Now this is a scenario typically you also do not want to have in your setup. Individual solutions built everywhere, or solutions that you can build effectively and standardize them, but you cannot replicate them. Now the last scenario, and I think that's obvious, this is the one where we want to end up. This is where we start to scaling value. from IIoT. This is the scale value scenario, and why? Because you are very efficient in building small solutions for well-defined use cases, and you have a solution to roll them out. Now, rolling them out helps you to standardize across sites, and of course, managing lower costs, lower risk. You can build one solution after the other and scale them out into your network. Now, I don't have a solution now, how we replicate it, but we'll talk about it in the next series. And when we talk about this question mark here, how can we replicate solutions in the network efficiently and in a digital manner? And looking forward to see you there. Thank you very much.